The sun bled across the mesa like a wound that refused to close, painting the dust in shades of rust and regret. Jack Harlan sat his saddle with the stillness of a man who had already died once and was only waiting for the world to notice. His duster hung open, the left sleeve torn away where the Apache woman's knife had kissed his arm the night before. The cut was shallow, but the memory ran deep. He could still feel the heat of her skin under his fingers, the way the calico had parted like a scream. He had not meant to hurt her. He had only meant to stop the fight before it turned fatal. But intentions were thin currency in the territory, and the shirt lay in tatters on the saloon floor, a flag of war. 200 warriors crested the ridge at dawn, their ponies silent as ghosts, lances catching the first light like shards of broken sky. Jack saw them from the corral where he was doctoring a lame mare. His hand went to the colt on his hip, then fell away. One bullet, 200 men. The math was merciless. He thought of the woman's eyes, black as obsidian, wide with shock and something fiercer than hate. He thought of the child she had shielded with her body when the drunk cowboy lunged. He thought of the way the saloon had gone still, every breath held, every glass forgotten. Then he thought of nothing at all, because the warriors were already thundering down the slope, and the mare bolted, and Jack stood alone in the dust with his head in his hands. They did not kill him. That was the first surprise. The leader, tall, scarred, with a necklace of bear claws, dismounted and walked forward until the muzzle of Jack's own rifle pressed against his chest. Jack had not even raised it. The Apache studied him the way a man studies a storm cloud, deciding whether to ride it out or run. Then he spoke in Spanish, slow and deliberate, the words rolling like distant thunder. You tore her shirt. Jack swallowed. I stopped a knife. You shamed her before her people. I saved her life. The warrior's eyes narrowed. Life is not the only thing a woman carries. Behind him, the others waited. No one moved. No one spoke. The wind lifted the dust and let it fall again, like a curtain between worlds. Jack felt the weight of every gaze, the weight of every year he had spent running from the man he used to be. He had been a soldier once, a husband, a father. Then the war took the first, fever took the second, and the bottle took the third. What was left was a ghost in boots, drifting from ranch to ranch, mending fences and breaking hearts. He had not saved anyone in so long he had forgotten the shape of mercy. He set the rifle down. The warriors took him at midday. They bound his wrists with rawhide, not tight enough to cut, just enough to remind him he was theirs now. They rode east, into the heart of the Chiricahua, where the mountains rose like the spine of some ancient beast. Jack's mare followed on a lead rope, her eyes rolling wide with fear. The child rode double with the scarred leader, Little Hawk. Jack would learn his name was. The boy was 8, maybe 9, with a scar across his lip that made him look older. He watched Jack the way a coyote watches a snare, curious and unafraid. They made camp at dusk in a canyon where the walls glowed red as forged iron. The women built fires of mesquite and pinon, the smoke rising in thin blue ribbons. Jack was given water, jerky, a blanket. No one spoke to him. The woman whose shirt he had torn, her name was Nisoni, sat across the fire with her back straight, her chin high. She wore a new blouse, buckskin this time, beaded with tiny shells that caught the firelight. Her eyes never left him. Not hate, not anymore. Something colder. Curiosity, maybe. Or judgment. That night, Jack dreamed of his daughter. She had been 6 when the fever took her, her hair the color of corn silk, her laugh like wind chimes. In the dream, she stood in the canyon, barefoot, holding out a torn shirt. Fix it, Daddy, she said. Fix it before they come. He woke before dawn, the dream clinging to him like sweat. The camp was stirring. Nisoni was already up, grinding corn between stones, her movements precise and angry. Jack watched her for a long time. Then he stood, walked to the edge of the firelight, and began to search the packs the warriors had left unguarded. He found what he was looking for in a saddlebag, a needle bone, sinew thread, a scrap of doeskin soft as butter. He sat cross-legged in the dirt and began to sew. The first stitch was clumsy. The second better. By the 10th, his fingers remembered. He had sewn uniforms in the war, patched his weefest dresses, mended his doctor's stalls. The doeskin took the thread like it was born for it. He worked until the sun rose, until the scrap became a shirt, Ismael, perfect, the size for a child. He beaded the collar with tiny turquoise stones he found in the dirt, each one a prayer. When he finished, he walked to where Nisoni knelt by the fire. The camp went still. Even the horses stopped chewing. He held out the shirt. She did not take it. For the boy, Jack said in Spanish. So he grows into something whole. Nisoni looked at the shirt, then at Jack. His eyes were dry, but something moved behind them, a shadow loosening its grip. She took the shirt, turned it over in her hands. The stitches were small and even, the beads placed with care. She slipped it over little Hawk's head. The boy stood straighter, his scar hidden beneath the collar. He touched the beads, then looked at Jack with something like wonder. The scarred leader, tall bear, watched from the shadows. He said nothing, but his hand rested on the hilt of his knife, and the blade did not leave its sheath. Days bled into weeks. Jack was not a prisoner, not exactly. He rose with the camp, tended the horses, hauled water, chopped wood. The warriors tested him. They made him run the gauntlet between two lines of lances, barefoot over hot stones. He did not flinch. They left him alone in the desert with no water, a single canteen, and a map drawn in charcoal. He found his way back before the moon set. They set him to wrestle the strongest young man, a giant named Cheto who could break Esther's neck with his hands. Jack lost, but he smiled when he hit the ground, blood on his teeth, and Cheto laughed for the first time in years. Nisoni watched it all. She said little, but her eyes followed him. One evening, she found him by the stream, washing blood from a cut on his arm. She sat beside him without speaking, unwrapped a bundle of herbs, and pressed them to the wound. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of questions neither knew how to ask. "Why?" she said at last. Jack stared at the water. "Because I broke something. And breaking is easier than fixing." She considered this. "My husband says you are a white man trying to buy his life with tricks." "Your husband is Tall Bear." She nodded. "He thinks you will run when the snow comes." Jack laughed, a sound like gravel. "I ran for 10 years. Got real good at it. But running don't stitch a shirt." She looked at him then, really looked. "You are not what I expected." "Neither are you." The first snow fell in November, thin and hesitant, like a lie trying to be true. The camp moved higher into the mountains, following the deer. Jack's hands cracked and bled from the cold, but he kept working. He built a corral from pine logs, reinforced with rawhide. He showed the boys how to gentle a wild mustang with nothing but patience and a soft rope. He told stories around the fire, not the sanitized ones, but the real ones. About the war. About the night his daughter died in his arms. About the morning he woke up in a ditch with a bottle for a pillow and no name for the man he had become. The warriors listened. Even Tall Bear listened, though his face never changed. One night, a raid went wrong. Mexican soldiers, drunk on mezcal and greed, ambushed a hunting party. 3 Apache fell. One was Little Hawk's older brother, barely 16. They brought the body back at dawn, wrapped in a blanket stiff with blood. The women wailed. The men stood silent, their faces carved from stone. Jack helped dig the grave in the frozen earth, his hands blistered and raw. When it was done, he stood over the mound and spoke the only prayer he knew, the one his wife had taught him in a language he had forgotten how to feel. That night, Nisoni came to him. She stood in the doorway of the wickiup they had given him, snow in her hair, her breath clouding the air. "They are coming," she said. "The soldiers. They followed the blood trail. They want the horses. They want the women. They want to finish what they started." Jack looked at her. "How many?" "60. Maybe more." He nodded once. "Then we give them something else to follow." He did not sleep. He worked through the night, rigging deadfalls from pine logs and rawhide, setting snares with bells made from tin cans. He showed the boys how to roll boulders from the cliffs, how to use the terrain like a weapon. When the soldiers came at dawn, riding hard up the canyon, they rode into a storm of their own making. Rocks crashed. Horses screamed. Bullets whined off stone. The Apache fought like mountain lions, silent and lethal. Jack fought beside them, his rifle steady, his heart strangely calm. When it was over, the canyon was quiet again. 20 soldiers lay dead. The rest fled, leaving their dead and their pride. The Apache lost 2 more. But the horses were safe. The women were safe. Little Hawk stood over the body of the captain, his small hands sticky with blood, his eyes too old for his face. Tall Bear found Jack at the edge of the cliff, staring down at the carnage. The wind whipped his duster around his legs like a flag of surrender. You could have run, Tall Bear said. I did run, Jack replied. This is me stopping. Tall Bear studied him for a long time. Then he reached into his pouch and drew out a necklace, bear claws, polished smooth, strung on sinew. He placed it around Jack's neck. You are not Apache, he said. But you are not white anymore either. You are something else. Something broken and remade. Jack touched the claws. They were worn from Tall Bear's hand. Spring came early that year. The snow melted in rivulets that sang down the mountains. The deer returned. The corn sprouted. Jack stayed. He built a cabin at the edge of the camp, small and sturdy, with a chimney that drew clean. He taught the children to read from a tattered Bible he found in a soldier's saddlebag. He learned the Apache words for mercy, for forgiveness, for home. One afternoon, Nisoni found him by the stream again. She carried a bundle wrapped in buckskin. When she unwrapped it, Jack's breath caught. It was the calico shirt, the one he had torn all those months ago. She had mended it, stitch by invisible stitch, the tear now a seam of tiny beads that caught the light like stars. I kept it, she said. To remember what was broken. Jack took the shirt. His hands shook. And now? Now it is whole. She paused. Like you. He looked at her then, really looked. The anger was gone. The shame was gone. What remained was something quieter, deeper. He reached out, hesitant, and touched her cheek. She did not pull away. That night, the camp held a feast. They roasted venison and piñon nuts, danced to the beat of drums older than memory. Jack stood at the edge of the firelight, the bear claw necklace heavy against his chest, the mended shirt soft beneath his fingers. Little Hawk ran to him, laughing, and pulled him into the circle. The women sang. The men clapped. The children spun like leaves in the wind. Tall Bear raised a cup of tiswin to the sky. To the men who tore a shirt, he called, and so the people back together. Jack drank. The liquor burned, but it was a good burn. He looked at Nisoni across the fire, her face glowing in the light, and for the first time in 10 years, he did not feel like a ghost. Years later, travelers would speak of a white man living among the Apache, a man with a scar on his arm and a necklace of bear claws. They said he could gentle a wild horse with a whisper, heal a wound with herbs and prayer, tell stories that made warriors weep. They said he had a wife with eyes like midnight and a laugh like summer rain, a son who rode like the wind and a daughter with her motor's fire. They said the shirt he wore was calico, mended with beads that told a story no one could read but everyone understood. And if you asked him how it began, he would smile, touch the scar on his arm, and say, it started with a tear. And it ended with a stitch. But that was not the end. The end was quieter. It was the morning Jack woke before dawn, the cabin warm with the smell of coffee and pine smoke. Nisoni slept beside him, her hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. Little Hawk, no longer little, snored in the loft. The baby stirred in her cradle, a soft sound like birds waking. Jack slipped outside, the cold air sharp against his skin. The mountains stood sentinel, their peaks brushed with the first light of rose and gold. He walked to the stream, the same stream where he had washed blood from his hands a lifetime ago. The water ran clear now, singing its endless song. He knelt, cupped his hands, and drank. The cold shocked him awake, alive, here. When he stood, he saw them, tracks in the mud, fresh and deep. Both tracks, leading into the trees. Ismail. The wild was still wild. The world was still broken. But he was not running anymore. He turned back toward the cabin, toward the smoke curling from the chimney, toward the sound of Nisoni humming as she ground corn. He touched the bear claws at his throat, the mended shirt beneath his coat. Then he walked home, his boots leaving prints that would fill with snow and melt with spring, over and over, until the story was no longer his but theirs, a people remade, stitch by careful stitch, In the quiet aftermath of a torn shirt and a heart that learned, too late and just in time, how to mend.